Well, hello again, guys, from here at Benton HQ. A hell of a lot to get through this morning. What a week it's been for Newcastle United and Eddie Howe, a particularly bruising week in more ways than one. Now, slight little change of location here, just give you an idea of where I am. Through the trees there, those are the training pitches. I don't know if you can make out the luminous of the mannequins. The players aren't quite out yet. Just over my shoulder is the pitch, Whitley Park, where the under-21s play. Of course, I was once an unused substitute in a cup final. Now I'm going to mention that every time. Oh, the pain. And over my shoulder again there is the media and scouting HQ, where we've just been speaking to Eddie Howe inside there. As I said, an awful lot to get through. The story I broke this week exclusively at Mail Sport, that Callum Wilson has suffered another injury setback. He's now facing 2 months out with a hamstring problem. Again, another story I broke. Nick Pope, he's a doubt for tomorrow with a knee injury. Eddie Howe has confirmed that as well this morning. He will see a specialist today. But what I'm going to answer, first of all, what does it all mean? And specifically, what does it mean with regards to January? We do know about Wilson. He is going to be out well into February now, a period that I've calculated includes at least 11 matches, if not more, if they do beat Brentford on Wednesday in the Carabao Cup. And let's hope they do beat Brentford on Wednesday in the Carabao Cup quarter-final, because that is absolutely key to maintaining momentum and feel good for this season. Lose that game and I really would fear for the mood and the direction of the campaign. But Wilson, what does it mean for January? Nothing. And there's two reasons for that. One, there isn't the ability to go out and spend and put down the money for a replacement striker. Now, I wrote 2-3 weeks ago that Newcastle had to sell to buy, and a lot of you guys didn't like that or come back and queried it. That's fair. That's okay. And the basis of the queries was, well, how come there was £70 million there for Marquis in the summer? Okay, that money was there. Newcastle thought there was an opportunity could present itself to sign an England international. And yes, they wanted Gay, and I think they actually need a player of Gay's profile. It wasn't as high as 70 million, by the way. I think Newcastle's pot was somewhere more in the 50s. It didn't happen, but if it had, they still would have then had to have sold either immediately in the summer, or if not, more likely in January, or a scenario they want to avoid again, going into June. You know, just because that £50 million was there did not mean it then could be spent with no consequence. And Eddie Howe hinted at it last week. He hinted at the fact that Newcastle might have to sell to buy. He went one further this week. He said they will have to sell to buy. His quote direct to us just now is that he expects Newcastle to be quiet in January unless they trade. I will reveal shortly one player who they could trade, who is a first team semi-regular, a squad player who's been here for a lot of years. He now is available for transfer in January. So that is one reason why Wilson won't be replaced, because in effect they can't really. They haven't got the funds there to do it. But also, more importantly, they're kind of used now to not having Callum Wilson there. Listen, I think he's wonderful. A club signs a player, you think you're getting a good player. I didn't realise Newcastle were getting an excellent player with Wilson, but everyone has kind of got used to the fact now, to come back to that phrase, that he doesn't play, that he isn't there. And they've gone through the first third of the season with Wilson out injured. You know, he's only come back for 4 substitute appearances. So the pecking order is there established. There's Alexander Isak. There's Anthony Gordon, really, as his deputy. Eddie Howe actually did use the phrase that Anthony Gordon is the backup striker a few weeks back. And then there is Willis Sula, who, on those training pitches, from what we hear, is improving all the time. He is getting better. And the little glimpses we've seen, there is promise there. Perhaps now in the new year, that'll be time to give him that chance, those minutes towards the end of a game, if, fingers crossed, Isak does stay fit. So for now, that is the reason why Wilson won't be replaced, and why the January transfer plan they had won't be ripped up and all funds and efforts diverted to a striker. As well, you've got to remember, if goes according to plan, and with Callum Wilson, sadly this is a big if, he should return in mid-February. And if he does, and if he can stay fit, and again, these ifs are getting even bigger with everyone I throw in here, then spend money on a striker in January when it could be better spent elsewhere, and that is my belief too. Yeah, I can understand the club's philosophy in that, but, and this is where it will change, if there is an injury to Alexander Isak between now and the end of January, which, again, that isn't as big an if as perhaps the Wilson ifs were. There's every chance that could happen, given Isak's own injury record. Then, of course, Newcastle's plan would change. But before the news on Wednesday about the length of Wilson's absence and what they intended to do in January, it hasn't changed. That's what I'm saying in the last 72 hours. Now, what do they want to do in January? Well, the priority is a right winger, and by extension as well, an area of focus still is a right-sided centre-half. It depends what they can do. Now, you might say, why do they need a defender when you've got Sven Botman coming back, Fabian Schär's there, Dan Burn and others? Well, the defence 2 weeks ago wasn't an issue at all. Now, all of a sudden, It is, and I honestly think, and I know they believe internally, that a defender would not only improve them defensively, it would change the way they attack as well. Because of that absence of pace there at the back at the moment, I think they're overcompensating at times. And Fabian Schär has been wonderful. He is wonderful, but he is now approaching 33 and things are beginning to slow a little bit. And I do think defensively Schär has become a little bit more suspect than he was previously. So to that end, to bring in a player of Gay's profile, I believe, and I think obviously they believe internally too, would improve them, not only defensively, but give them just a different profile of player to take them up the field. So don't rule out right centre-back, even though what I'm hearing back is that right wing, an obvious area of improvement that we've known for so long now, that is the priority. But none of that will happen if players don't go out. And that is because of PSR. It was something we wrote 4 weeks ago, like I said, which people couldn't get their head around. That's okay. You know, we're here to try and explain those things. But now it's being backed up, supported and revealed on the record by the manager. So who would go out of the door? Well, the name which has been floated for a long time now is Miguel Almiron, of course, but you can't sell Almiron if you don't have a buyer. And there's no point in letting Miguel Almiron go for close to nothing if then that doesn't enable you to go out and push back those boundaries of PSR to bring in a replacement. So they are going to have to get creative. They are going to have to look at other areas of the squad. Now, Wilson's injury means that Wilson can't be sold in January. Kieran Trippier was the one who could have gone last January to Bayern Munich, of course. Wilson, likewise, on reflection, perhaps for the betterment of the club and even maybe the player himself, that move should have happened. So Wilson and Trippier probably aren't going to happen in January, because Trippier, I don't think as well, from a fitness selection point of view, isn't in the right place to be going out and making that transfer. So I think those two will probably stay. So you've got to look elsewhere. And this was revealed in my Newcastle Confidential column yesterday, that Sean Longstaff, the talk in transfer circles, it is now known amongst clubs and intermediaries that he is available for transfer. His one-year contract extension has now been invoked, so that no longer expires this summer. The club have taken the option for it to run to the summer of 2026. And what that does is, it just protects their value. It means in January they can command a fee from whatever that fee may be. If he was out of contract in the summer, that of course would change and the player would just be minded to sit there and leave on a free transfer. So I think Longstaff is aware of the situation. He knows that there perhaps is an effort from those above at the club to move him on this January, and that of course comes back to the reason Elliot Anderson was sold, the homegrown academy players. And it's not right that PSR model encourages clubs to do this and motivates them to sell their own homegrown players, but it does, and that is the reality of the situation. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a taker, if there is a buyer for Sean Longstaff to move on. And listen, I know he splits opinion. I've always been on the side of the fence that believes Longstaff has a real worth to the team. Now, that hasn't been there this year, but I'd also ask the question, why hasn't it been there? Well, perhaps he's known, and again, a player's mindset is such a fragile thing. So many things go into a player's performance, and if you know down the line that perhaps your future isn't at the club, or there will be an effort made to move you on, well, isn't that naturally going to affect performance? And I do just think with Longstaff, there's been a little feeling of not being necessarily loved. I don't think he's one of the best paid players in the squad. He's never really got that contract. Some of his performances have at times deserved. So for me, I can understand the little dip and the little drop off, but this does feel now as if we're heading towards the end of his time at Newcastle. And that would be sad for me, a player, a person I've always had a hell of a lot of time for. But again, it comes back to what I said about Almiron and others. You've still got to have a buy, and if Newcastle aren't able to trade, and they haven't traded well enough in the 3.5 years now with Saudi ownership, not at all. It's the reason they found themselves in this position. It's all well and good moaning about PSR, and PSR is real. It is there, but you can do something about it. Chelsea and other clubs, you know, they found ways around it by trade and by moving those players out, enables you then to bring players in. Newcastle have got to do that better, and that, for now, going into January, has probably got to be their focus to enable them to bring in the players they need, because the squad does need something. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but the squad has gone stale. That was the big word Eddie Howe introduced to the room with us last week, twice there. You know, that's a big word to throw in there, the notion that a squad, a group, that feeling of excitement, that era-defining adventure that they were on, well, it has gone a little bit stale. It's the truth. That is the reality. I'm writing a big piece about this tomorrow for the Daily Mail. Please revisit my social platforms and read it. You know, I'm really going to get stuck into that for the reason this season is going the way it has. And there has just been that little loss of feeling among the group in the dressing room, that belief and doubt over the direction and the speed of the short-term project. You know, and these players and this manager, I know again on the back of Brentford last weekend, there's a lot of noise about Eddie Howe. Trust me, this is my opinion, you might have your own. Newcastle have got the right manager, but he and the squad there, they need help and they deserve that in January, and they've got to try and find a way to do it. I really believe that so strongly now, because that staleness has crept in to a degree, and if you've just got that tiny little element of doubt, it comes back to Sean Longstaff's situation, albeit for different reasons, but any player, if you've just got that little element in your mind that just turns those marginal gains into marginal losses, the difference in results subsequently is absolutely vast, and I believe that's what we're seeing right now. Now, it doesn't mean Eddie Howe wasn't going to go out and in the isolation of the work he does on the training pitches there behind us, find a solution. Absolutely he does, but there's bigger picture stuff at play here, and that was what I asked the manager this morning, and he agreed. He said, you know, of course, players, they're on the front line, they're absorbing everything that happens at a football club, and this journey, it has just slowed, you know, it has changed this year, this calendar year, since in January. Darren Neal said that every player has their price. Don't underestimate, guys, how much that permeated the dressing room and how many players now potentially are looking at being elsewhere. So the club is at a crossroads, absolutely, in terms of the direction of it, and what they do in January might just keep them on the right road for this season at least, before bigger summers and bigger projects and bigger windows to come down the line. But what they've got to do now, Eddie and the players, is find a way to block that out, and it's not easy. We're seeing that, but they are better than what they showed at Brentford last weekend, because this is a huge week. I talked there about era defining. Well, this week, this could be season defining. Leicester at home tomorrow, Brentford on Wednesday, before Ipswich away next Saturday. Ipswich, who haven't won at home this season. Of course, we know how that narrative plays out, don't we? First of all, it is that Leicester game, and of course, it is the nature of the game in which Newcastle have struggled recently. A team who will probably come here, sit in, frustrate them, let Newcastle have the ball, and what have they got? What do they do with it? No surprise, given those little doubts I spoke about, that the players do raise themselves for the games which naturally, against the big clubs, would rally you and inspire you. This tomorrow, this is the bigger challenge, and it's why, as much as my prediction is going to go to a home win, because I do think when they've needed a response, they've always got a response, be that those you guys in the stands or those on the pitch, and they do need it tomorrow. I think that will come, and I think they will win. But would I be at all surprised if we came out of it, speaking of the issues we spoke about against Brighton, against West Ham? Well, no, I wouldn't be. And again, I talk about that bruising week. It was a bruising defeat down at Brentford, and what is subsequently then played out in terms of the injuries, the loss of Wilson. I understand there's one or two of the little niggles as well. Now, Joe Willock, there's better news on him, but all of that comes together to this sense, this snowballing feel of just the club not being in a good place right now. But as I said before, it's on those guys to sort that, and they can go out and change that narrative tomorrow. And I really believe they will. Again, you know, my predictions have been pretty good, I think, this season. So I'm going to go for a home victory. Now, tell me what you think below the line in terms of the selection as well. You know, it's going to be a big call tomorrow, because I think down at Brentford, I just looked at that, and when Anthony Gordon and Sandro Tonali weren't in the starting 11. Now, the data will be there. Eddie hasn't just made that decision, you know, on a whim or just a suspicion. The numbers will be there telling him that Gordon and Tonali, it was for the betterment of the team and the individual, that they didn't start. And if you look at how the actual game played out, getting 2-2 at half-time, and you then think, okay, you know, bring on the cavalry. It worked okay in that regard, but it doesn't really work when players don't start games. And I just think, I looked at that 11 and they just lost that momentum and that feel good. I was really surprised at the midfield having clicked the way it did against Liverpool, and looked like for the first time a proper functioning midfield with those three. I mean, Guimaraes, Joe Linton and Tonali. To then rip that up to a degree down at Brentford, I looked at the team sheet and I didn't feel good about it. And to take Gordon out as well now, would Liverpool, if the Merseyside derby had gone ahead, would Van Dijk and Salah have not played if they were fatigued from Wednesday? I think they probably would have played. So I was surprised at that, but that is on those guys inside. Again, they've got the data there available to them, but I would fully expect Gordon to return tomorrow, and Tonali too in the midfield. At least hope so. I think that would be the right call. Now I just want to finish with where I started really, and that is talking about Callum Wilson. And when I posted the story, a lot of the comments beneath it, I understand this, I do, that there's a lot of anger at the situation, be it anger towards the club for not moving on Wilson sooner when we knew his injury track record, but also anger towards the player. And I understand this less, because you've got to remember there's a human being there, and in response to the story, Callum Wilson issued a statement the following morning in which he spoke about the emotional roller coaster he's been on. Now, no player wants to be injured. And I know Callum, honestly, again, I use this phrase, trust me, when he is a brilliant, inspirational individual, he really is. And Eddie Howe has just revealed to us there that he actually paid for his own treatment at times to take himself away from his family, away from those distractions, to go and get the best possible specialist opinions from around the world. And he came back and there really was a feeling that he was back for good this time. Now, of course, there's always an asterisk next to that with Callum in this latest news. It's devastating for him, and you've got to remember that no one will be hurting more than the player himself. No player wants to be injured. And I just think some of the comments and some of the vitriol directed towards him, and it wasn't all of it, but there are a section there which I just think, come on, you wouldn't say that. If you bumped into him in the street, you'd shake his hand and wish him all the best. And if you spoke to him, you'd absolutely say that, because you'd realise what a good guy he is. So I would just urge that little bit of understanding, as frustrating as it is, in part because he's a brilliant, wonderful player, and Newcastle would be so much better off with him. So I just wanted to say that. Now, a couple of other quick little newsy items to wrap up from my Newcastle Confidential column, link in the description below. There's a pre-season friendly which has been proposed up at Celtic on Saturday, July the 19th. Now, that hasn't been rubber stamped yet, but I understand that it is likely to get the go-ahead. Newcastle, on the back of that, might then jet out on pre-season tour, be that the Far East or be that America, which I'm guessing is probably more likely this year, especially 1 year out from the World Cup. Other little bits in there, I don't think Lewis Miley's going to go on loan in January, but Alex Murphy, he might do. Miley, if Longstaff does go, we'll have to wait and see on that front. Miley, by extension, of course, will be needed around the first team. I think we'll see his minutes step up in the new year. So yeah, guys, that's about it for now from me. I'll just give you one last little scan of the surroundings. I know you guys, especially who are based abroad, do like a feel of where we are in terms of weather updates as well. Yeah, well, we're into December now. We're 3 weeks into winter, and it's it's okay, actually. Not bad at all. Got the gilet on the short sleeves here. So please hit like, comment, subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow reflecting on, guys, what I'm convinced. I always have a little feel for these things in terms of the reaction, the response. It's going to be a home win when I'm walking up and down those terraces of the Millburn stand. Thank you again so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.